do you stone to death disobedient children?
I see you. I see you.
Do you wear clothing made of 2 different weaves?
I'm sorry, what?
Do you wear clothes made of 2 different weaves? Do you stone to death disobedient children?
Well, first of all, you're quoting 2 different verses, okay?
Yeah.
We have to realize there's 2 kinds of laws in the Bible, okay? We have moral laws and symbolic laws. Okay?
So how can you symbolically stone to death a child?
No, that's a moral law.
Okay, so you have to stone to death.
So you do. So
well, let's do one. We're doing one at a time. The first one you said was about wearing 2 different weaves, okay? That's a symbolic law. A symbolic law. Once Christ came, he did away with the symbolic laws. The moral laws are still in force.
Well, what was the point of the symbolic law?
The symbolic law was to communicate internal truths in such a way that they're deeply impressed upon the conscience of man.
So why couldn't you just
for example,
tell us?
About the 2 different kinds of fabrics, okay? What God was trying to communicate is that he took a nation, Israel, that he kept pure by giving them his law and giving them his prophets, and he wanted them to be separate from all the Gentile nations. I'm just curious, are you of Jewish heritage?
I am.
Me personally?
Yeah.
No, I'm
okay. So in other words, people like you and me who screw things up all the time, he wanted the Jewish nation to be separate from us because we kept polluting them with our vileness and our evil. So he gave those laws to communicate to the Jews to be separate from those Gentile nations. Now, as you know, eventually what happened was Israel itself became rebellious. But for a long time there, they were following God. So the symbolic laws are all done away with now because Christ has come and the reality of the kingdom is encroaching upon us. Now the moral laws are still in force. Now the second thing you brought up was whether or not we should stone recalcitrant children. Now you have to realize in Hebrew there's more than one word for child. That word for that child in that verse is not a little child. We're not supposed to, the Old Testament Israelites were not supposed to stone little children. What that's talking about is a grown child who continues in a recalcitrant way over and over to disobey his parents and the laws of the land. And they were not allowed to do it. They had to bring it to the government, which was the elders of the community. So it would be like a trial. They would say, okay, my child did this. He beat up someone, took their money. We counseled him, then he did it again. We counseled him again, then he raped a woman. We counseled him again, then he did this. All the evidence is brought forth. If it was true he did all those things, he would be stoned to death. But it's not killing little children. That's a misunderstanding of the passage.
Okay, well then let me say this. You said that the first one was symbolic and you told me the symbolism there. Why didn't he just tell you right up front what he meant instead of using a symbol?
It's the same reason we have art. We artists create...
But art is a human thing.
No.
Shouldn't God just say blatantly that this is what you do? He did in the 10 Commandments.
The principle is the same. The reason that we have art is so artists can communicate some very important truths in a very vivid way that really impresses upon us what that artist is trying to communicate.
Except a lot of art uses interpretation so every different person would have a different interpretation of it, so that means that the law is not necessarily concrete.
Oh, well, if that was the only thing he did, that would be true, but God didn't just give the symbolic laws. In conjunction with the symbolic laws, he gave them commands. In other words, he actually told them, do not mix with the Gentile nations. You shall not marry them. You shall not worship their false gods.
So God was a racist.
Keep separate. Yes, he was. But he's the only one that's allowed to be a racist.
So God was a racist.
Keep separate. Yes, he was. But he's the only one that's allowed to be a racist. We're not allowed to be a racist.
I hope you just heard that.
I have a question though, real quick. How can the whole religion base their entire faith on a book that was written in a language that was dead for 1,000 years when they found the scrolls, the Greeks found the scrolls? How can you base your entire life off of a non-translatable book?
Yeah, which language do you think was dead?
It's the Aramaic that was written in.
It wasn't.
It was written in Aramaic, my friend. We all know it. We all know it was written in Aramaic. The Greeks interpreted it as they thought it was, and when the parts they couldn't interpret, they basically added it themselves.
It was the Old Testament was written in Hebrew.
Aramaic, my friend.
Hebrew.
Yes, it was written in Aramaic.
The only New Testament book that may have been written in Aramaic was the Book of Matthew. It's the only one.
The Exodus is written in Aramaic, my friend. The whole book basically is written in Aramaic.
Haven't you ever heard of the Masoretic text?
I have, and I've heard the Dead Sea Scrolls, and I've heard all these things.
The Masoretic text is all Hebrew. Okay, there are many copies of the Aramaic Old Testament. What I'm saying is,
But the question is that how can you base your entire life off of something that was, let's just be, you know, for sake of argument, a book that was not fully translatable. You base your entire whole life on it. I mean, everything. You don't even have your own thought of your own, basically. I mean,
now you're
when it comes to religion, you have no
overstating your
thought
case.
on your own. I'm not overstating my case. I just feel that that's what the basis of it all is, and your whole life is on a book that I believe can't be really translated to its full extent.
Yeah.